Hey, this week I'm showing you exactly how I transplant my tomato starts to their final home in the garden, how I protect the soil to conserve the moisture to help prevent blossom end rot. I'm going to go over the anatomy of the tomato plant, why we prune, how it determines our plant spacing, and how to do it for maximum fruit production and maximum disease prevention. It's week 8 of the 2023 spring garden, and it starts right now. When I transplant this tomato plant into this bed, I'm going to bring the camera in very close so you can see exactly what I'm doing. But first I want to talk about planting the tomato plant and how deep we plant the tomato plant. And the tomato plant is a bit special like that because what we want to do with the tomato plant is plant it as deep as we can in the bed. If you look at a tomato stem, you'll see white hairs coming out of that stem everywhere on it. And anywhere where those white hairs come into contact with soil, those white hairs are going to become more root system for the plant. So it's beneficial to us to plant that tomato plant deep in order to have a bigger root mass to support a bigger plant and more fruit production on the plant. So to achieve that, what we're going to do is we're going to trim off here and here on this plant. This one, this one. And we're going to plant this up to about right there. That's going to help ensure that we get a much bigger root system on the plant, grow a bigger plant, and grow more fruit on the plant. I'll bring you in right now and show you exactly how I do this. I've got my trowel and I've got some buckwheat growing in front. I've got a marigold here, and you can see I have my soaker hose running through my bed right here. And I'm going to move that soaker hose a little bit this way to give me a little bit more room to plant this plant. Here. Like that. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to dig a hole right here, and I'm going to fill this container with that soil because I'm going to use that to backfill after I've planted the tomato plant. All right, I've got a decent sized hole. Let's check and see. That's great. Now I'm going to put a little bit of moisture in the bottom of that hole, just a little bit of water. You could add a little bit of balanced fertilizer in the bottom of that hole, but I've never seen a huge benefit from doing that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop this right in there, right in the bottom. And I'm just going to backfill all of that soil. And do a final watering in. There it is. That's transplanted. And that looks great. The next thing we do is so critically important for our tomatoes, and that is to mulch around the tomato plant. And mulching does two really critical things for us. Number one, it conserves the moisture in the soil. Blossom end rot, which is the rotting out of the bottom of the plant, is caused by a lack of calcium in the plant. But that lack of calcium 99% of the times is caused by an uneven watering in the plant. In other words, the soil goes completely dry, then we water it. It goes completely dry again, then we water it again. The plant gets stressed out, it can't take up the calcium it needs, and it takes it from the bottom of those fruits instead, and it rots out those fruits. Number two is this helps to prevent disease, because when it does rain, it prevents the water from splashing directly on the soil and splashing that soil up onto the bottom of your leaves of the plant. That soil coid have some soil-borne diseases in it that affect the bottom leaves on the plant, it spreads to the rest of the plant, and then the plant dies. So it's really critical, and I use a hardwood mulch that I get locally at Lowe's here in South Texas. This stuff has been unbelievable. It just works so great, and at the end of the season, a lot of times I'll use it as a brown ingredient in my compost. But I put maybe 1 to 2 inches all around the plant, and I leave about a 3 to 4 inch circle around the stem of that plant, just so that if I have to do any manual watering, then I can easily get in there and manual water. I don't typically have to manual water now because I have the soaker hose systems installed, and that's another thing that I really encourage you to do, or a drip hose system, and I've done some videos on those that you can find in my videos. So this tomato plant on the left, I have already pruned before the video, and we're going to use this as an example to talk about the anatomy of a tomato plant. And I'm going to bring you in very close again when I talk about that so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And then we're going to apply those techniques to this plant and talk about how we choose to prune the tomato plant is going to affect how we are going to space those tomato plants out. An indeterminate tomato plant has a main stem. It has side branches. Above where the side branch meets the main stem, in what I call the armpit, here grows out a sucker. Above the sucker, you get fruit clusters. The interesting thing about indeterminate tomato plants is these suckers become their own main stems in a way, because they will grow side stems, they will grow suckers in the armpits of those side stems, and then they will have fruit clusters growing above where that sucker is coming out. And if left unchecked, this would just multiply exponentially and become just a massive, huge plant that was very dense, without airflow, typically would get a lot of disease, or could get a lot of disease, and you won't get maximum fruit production if you just let it grow like that. Or I have never gotten maximum production just by letting that tomato plant grow without pruning it. So what we want to do is we want to come in anywhere from the bottom of the plant up to about 12 to 18 inches and clear everything from the bottom of this plant. And the reason we do that is it helps us create airflow around the bottom of the plant. That airflow will help to prevent things like powdery mildew on the leaves. It will also help to prevent any backwash from rain on the soil or the mulch hitting the bottom of these leaves. It's just good practice. Now, from this first sucker on up, this is where we have to determine, how do we want to grow the plant? Do we want to just grow one main stem and trim every single sucker off the plant? Do we want to let one of the lower suckers go, then trim all the other suckers off the plant and have two main stems growing out of the plant with fruit clusters or tomatoes growing out of both of these two main stems up the total height of that plant? And that's how I choose to grow it, or how I'm choosing to grow it. And because I'm choosing to grow that like this, I've spread these plants out about 12 to 18 inches so that I have room as these plants grow. I can strap this first sucker and this main stem to my twine, my trellis, and I strap that using garden Velcro, and I let that grow all the way up the trellis, two main stems all the way up, creating fruit up this entire plant, up two main stems. You could even grow three main stems, and if you did that, you would space your plants out a little bit wider to make room for those three main stems growing up your trellis. Or you could just grow one single main stem and prune all of your suckers off of this plant. And then you could plant your plants a little bit closer together, because you're not going to have more than one main stem growing up this plant generating fruit for your plant. Quick side note, These are 4 cucumber plants I have growing, and cucumbers grow in a very similar way as tomatoes in that they'll grow suckers up all of the armpits between a main branch and a stem coming out. And those suckers will then become their own main stem with more suckers coming off them, and they'll grow exponentially as well, which is why when you prune cucumber plants, you're pruning them in a very similar way, determining how many of these main stems do you want growing up the plant. You could grow it with 1, 2, 3, 4. Choice is yours, and the spacing you determine or the spacing you use with your cucumber plants will be determined by how you're planning to grow that plant. These cucumber plants, the 2 on the left have been getting compost tea for 2 weeks. The 2 on the right have not. I don't see a huge difference in growth right now or health of the plant, but I'm really curious to see for the rest of the season what the results of that experiment come out like. Come back for that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to prune this tomato plant. I'm going to start at the very bottom, and I'm going to take off all of this growth up this plant about 12 to 18 inches. From here, get this last one. Okay, that's great. From here, I'm going to let this sucker become another main branch growing up this plant, and I will continue to prune out all the other suckers on this plant for the life of the plant. That is how easy it is to prune tomato plants. And you would come in every week or so, and where you have that sucker growing out in the armpit of the plant, you'd either just pull it out, or if it were too big, use some snippers. All my tomatoes are finally planted out. I've done the first set of pruning on all of them. The cucumbers are growing, cantaloupes are growing, watermelon, squash, zucchini growing in the main garden. Really looking forward to the rest of this growing season. Thank you for visiting, and thank you for watching the video. And if you're a new gardener who knows nothing about gardening, but you want to learn how to do it, it really isn't difficult. I've done a lot of videos aimed at first-time gardeners. Have a look through my channel videos. I'm sure you'll find something there that will help you. See everyone next week.